Well, thanks for letting me be here. It is a privilege to be out here. Being from the West, something that we're not used to is green. You guys get a lot of rain out here. You get more rain in a month than we get in a year. It's amazing to me how much water and how much moisture is out here, but really grateful to be here. And I think what we have to discuss today is, I hope, whenever I talk, I really want to have you think outside the box. There is so much advancement happening right now in crop genetics, in nutrient technology, in molecular research, that to not look at advancements, I think, is not a wise thing. And so one of the things I hope that happens today, if nothing else, is an alternative way that you've been traditionally taught to think about how crops grow, about how crops actually absorb nutrients, about how we should actually think about putting together a crop nutritional program. So with that, Chad, let's turn it on.
You guys are going to be treated to something that not a lot of people get a chance to do, and I'm not going to pump your tires up too much. You're going to see it here now as Darin starts to talk about, when we look at traditional agriculture, right, what do we talk about? I'm going to put you, come on, you sit right in the front. Kyle, you shouldn't have done that. I'm going to pick on you. Where's your brother, Cody? Cody, right. Listen, what we talk about all the time is pounds per acre in farming, right? We're going to talk about something different. We're going to hear about charge per acre, and it's completely different. When you look at pounds per acre, and Amy, wherever you're at, we're going to show some of the math and the science behind pounds per acre, nutrient use efficiency that people talk about. You're going to look at a different concept here that's charge per acre. So here's what I want you to think about as Darin starts to talk about. It's not 1 pound per bushel of corn, right? Think about the charge per bushel. How does the energy in that plant utilize and metabolize nutrients to grow or move production, right? That's the number one thing I want you to remember. And you're going to see why some of the technology that Darin's been working with for over 30 years is in some of the products like RDX-N and a lot of the other products out there. But it's going to be charge per bushel, not pounds per bushel. So as we talk about that, plant charge balance, Darin.
So let's go to the first slide.
I got you.
Okay, so I like to break things down into basics, okay? The most important biochemical reaction on planet Earth is photosynthesis. It drives life itself. We are able to eat, plants grow because of photosynthesis, and that is a natural biochemical reaction that utilizes God-given energy, which is sunlight. It traps sunlight, okay? So one of the first questions that I discuss with people is, what is the product of photosynthesis? What is the product of photosynthesis? Most people say carbohydrates or sugars, right? We miss a step. When we jump to sugar, we miss a step.
I promise we're going to get you a wireless mic here.
That's all right, no problem. That step is the following. I have 2 water molecules. Plants take up, that's again a God-given thing, water. What happens is that breaks down into 4 protons and 4 electrons and oxygen. We all know that plants give off oxygen. What we never talk about are these 2 things. Charge. When you talk about your fertilizer program, as Chad said, you think in pounds per acre. But the very first thing that a plant does is it creates a charge. If that's the very first thing that a plant does, if it's so important, rather than talking about pounds per acre of nitrogen or phosphorus or potassium, if the very first thing a plant does is create charge, we should talk about that. We should talk about charge and how that relates to how plants take up nutrients, okay? So let's talk about that. So we have this reaction of photosynthesis, and we put water up, we create charge, water, hydrogen, or carbon dioxide, and then that's when we create carbohydrates. And you guys get paid for carbohydrates. That's sugar, starch, sugar, et cetera, et cetera. That is the reaction that drives us and that creates the assimilation of nutrients in a plant. Charge is what starts that out, okay? So that's number one. Number two, what do all fertilizer nutrients have in common? When you write out that really big check for nitrogen or for phosphorus or whatever blend you're creating, what do all nutrients have in common? They all have a charge. Okay? So, nitrate nitrogen
Is it hot?
has a negative charge. Ammonia has a positive charge. Phosphorus has a negative charge. Potassium has a positive charge. So let's talk about this. Think about it. The very first reaction a plant does is break the water molecule and create charge. The very nutrients that a plant takes up, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, have a charge. Where did pounds per acre come in? Because it's easy for us to think about. We have a scale, we have a big truck, and I can measure it out in pounds per acre. But in reality, a plant reacts to charge. Chemistry is nothing but charge. Chemistry, the nutrients that you buy, is nothing but charge, positive or negative, okay? So I'm going to jump ahead and assume that we're okay with this. This is all basic science. Y'all learned this in high school biology. You were just asleep in class, trust me, okay? Because it's boring. This is not sexy, this is boring, okay? The third thing that we have to discuss, and then we can get along on things. The third thing we have to discuss is this. A plant must balance itself. A plant has to have 50% positive and 50% negative charge. These are not redox facts. This is not something I made up. This is basic plant physiology 101. So if all plants create a charge, all fertilizer nutrients are charged, and a plant must balance itself 50% positive and 50% negative, does it not make sense to think when I buy my fertilizer to think not just about pounds per acre, but about charge per acre? Because here's the one thing that happens when a plant gets out of balance. It will stop producing sugar, it will stop producing starch, it will stop growing to balance the charge. That is a biochemical fact, okay? So as I approach my nutrient acquisition this fall or next spring, and I look at the mix and the blend that I'm looking at, one of the things I'm going to propose to you is you start thinking about plant charge balance and how you can add things to your nutrient program to create this plant charge balance, because as a plant is balanced, its ability to absorb nutrients increases significantly. And some of the research evidence we're going to show you today is going to point to that fact. Okay?
Darin, can I interrupt you? Zach,
Please.
come up here and get this. So, listen, there's confusion in a simple world. When you look at the word balance, right? Everybody tries to market a word underneath balance. And I'm not going to pick on anybody, but when you look at some of the noise and confusion in the marketplace, when you talk about balance, it's not all created equally, right? So you look at balance from mineral nutrition, sometimes you hear about ratios, right? And you look at ratios from mineral nutrition, you've got your P to Z ratios, everybody knows and have heard about mineral nutrition ratios. This is different than balancing ratios, right? And when you look at, I'll stay over here. And when you look at that balance, it's different. So I want you to think differently, right? When you start hearing him talk about plant charge balance and what that means when you start looking at, I'm going to use a big word, homeostasis. What's that mean?
So realistically, it might be easier to not mess with this. We good? There we go. Okay.
what we're doing is, you all have heard the discussion about balance. Okay, we try to balance our lives out. We try to mentally be balanced, all those things. All we're doing with plant charge balance is diving into the actual foundation of what balance means. That's all we're doing, okay? Yeah, you should be balanced. You should put on the right amount of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, micronutrients, etc. We're all in that constant search for the right nutrient balance. You've been doing that for years. What I'm suggesting to you is that hasn't gone far enough, because it's not just putting on a ratio of NPK, it's looking at charge within that. That's how you become more efficient with your nutrients, okay? Just a couple of things that come from your part of the world. The University of Illinois, several years ago, how long ago was it? 10 years ago, John, they did the nitrogen study? 5 years ago. 30% of all of the nitrogen that you buy ever sees the plant. Only 30%. What happens to the other 70%? I would submit to you that because the plant is not capable or not efficient in taking it up, it's wasted. 70% of applied nitrogen fertilizer never gets to the plant. That's a staggering number. That is a staggering number, okay? It's not because the fertilizer isn't available. It's not because it's not properly made. It's because the delivery system or the system of assimilation isn't efficient enough. Okay, here's what happens in a plant. You'll all see that I took art in college, okay? If I have my plant, nitrogen use is a feedback loop. A plant can only do two things with nitrogen. It can only store it as nitrate nitrogen, or it can utilize it and it has to convert nitrate nitrogen to ammonia. And then it takes the ammonia and makes amino acids. That's how it works. When a plant isn't efficiently running to make amino acids, it stores nitrate nitrogen. You've all seen this. We call it vegetative growth. You've all seen where you have a really happy plant that's really growing well, has a whole bunch of leaves, and not very much fruit. That's because you are storing nitrate nitrogen and it is not being converted to ammonia. That's a fact. That is a fact, okay? The only way that it can convert it to ammonia is if it has carbon, or if it has a source of sugar, which you can provide externally. It's a feedback loop. So what happens is, I don't have enough carbon in my soil, therefore I can't convert to nitrogen, therefore I have to store more nitrate, and I don't get production. The way you move this forward is you enhance photosynthesis and the electrochemical reaction so this can all move and nitrogen starts to metabolize better. That's not true just of nitrogen, that's true of phosphorus, that's true of potassium, that's true of elements in general. All related back to charge. All related back to charge, because the reason that I reduce my assimilation of carbon is because my plant is out of balance. This is really not complex at all. Really not.
Can I dumb it down even more? Because for me, when I seen this for the first time, I had to see it 2 or 3 times. He knows I'm not super intelligent, so he slows down for me, which is nice. But when you talk about storage, Darin, we talked about apples. John, you were telling me a lot about apples up north. The fact that if it cannot utilize that nitrogen, it stores it in the vacuoles, right? In the plant. If a plant is storing nitrogen, what is it doing? If it can't use it, it's causing damage and stress. In apples, for example, it'll make a soft fruit. So it's got to take up nitrogen, and if it's going to take it up and store it, now all of a sudden we could be causing damage. I would yield to you the reason we have our limiting factor, when we start talking about limiting factors, it's not the pounds of nitrogen that we are short.
No.
We say we run out of gas, right? Oh, we ran out of gas because we have that tip back. We are out of balance, you guys.
Correct.
We are out of balance. Or we're storing too much of the nitrate nitrogen and causing damage and stress.
Nitrogen is the only plant nutrient that's a gas. Everything else is a mineral. The plant can almost not take it up. It will always take up nitrogen. If there's nitrate in the soil and the plant has the ability, it will do one of two things. It will take it up, or it will get burned because that salt sits at the root system and you see that burn. One of two things happen. Nitrogen is so easily assimilated by the plant that it takes up too much. So, if we talk now about plant charge balance, and I have 50% positive, 50% negative. 80% of all negative charge in a plant comes from one nutrient, nitrate nitrogen. So here we go, and we've done a wonderful job. Again, I am so proud to be a part of this industry. I grew up on a family farm. My father was a school teacher, and I was telling Chad's father, the old 856 out here that he has parked at the entrance, I grew up on one of those. Before school in the morning, just like you guys, I was on one of those, and after football practice in the evening, I was on one of those, okay? So I cut my teeth in this industry, and I'm very proud to be a part of it. Nothing I am saying is meant to be anything but we know what we know. If we know better, we should do better, okay? We should be able to do better with what we know now about how plants grow. And the point I'm trying to make to you is we have maximized how much we can get out of nitrogen. Does anyone here think that if I double my nitrogen, I'm going to double my yield? That used to be the case. I'd put on more nitrogen with genetics, etc. We could push yields. Now we know that we have found the limit of nitrogen application in our current genetics. We know that. How am I going to get more units per acre? Because we know that corn is capable. One of my college research projects was working with Dr. Bruce Bugsby, who is a NASA research scientist, okay? And we were trying to grow space wheat, space corn, okay? And we had this huge chamber, and we had these wheels that the corn was growing on to simulate no gravity. We were able to grow in this environment where we supplied the right nutrients in the right balance. We were able to grow 900 bushel corn. But that's because everything was perfect. The sunlight was perfect, the water was perfect, the air temperature was perfect, everything was perfect. Well, my point in telling you that is genetically, at a 200 bushel corn reel, we're about 20% of the genetic potential of that plant. So we know we can get more. More fertilizer isn't necessarily the answer. It's understanding how plants grow and assimilate. So I'm buying this nitrogen fertilizer, which you all are really happy about the price of nitrogen right now. I'm sure of that. And 80% of it is stored in the plant as negative. What do I have to do? The plant has two choices. When a plant takes up nitrogen, my beautiful drawing, if I have nitrate nitrogen stored in the leaf, the plant could do one of two things. It takes up nitrogen, I have this, it either has to expel a negative charge or it has to take up a positive charge. That's how it works. Remember, it has to be in balance. I've created a negative gradient in the plant. In order to balance, I either have to take up a positive charge, perhaps as potassium, or I have to put an electron in the soil. One of the two. If I don't do this, the plant will stop growing. It will stop growing. And so guess what our response has been in the past? When this happens and I don't get the response I want out of nitrogen, what do we usually do? We add more nitrogen. Thank you. We add more nitrogen. When more nitrogen isn't the problem, it is imbalance of charge. It is imbalance of charge. That is my proposal to you today about nutrient efficiency and how to get more A, out of your fertilizer budget, and B, out of the crop that you're growing. It's not about more fertilizer. It's not about creating this better blend. The mineral nutrients that we have are very good. It's what we're blending them with that we can improve, okay? What is the greatest limiting factor in fertilizer today? One nutrient, the other nutrient that we never talk about, because it's free. It's free. Carbon dioxide. We never talk about carbon in agriculture. So we have manure out here in the old days in the 30s, 40s, and 50s before synthetic fertilizer was around. What was our source of fertilizer? It was manure. It was manure. And manure is very rich in carbon. Okay? So I have this carbon source and plants grew. What did we forget about when we created synthetic fertilizer? How many of you, up until recently, since it's becoming a thing, but through the 60s, 70s, and 80s, when we were getting these fantastic responses out of synthetic fertilizer, how many of you thought about how much carbon you were adding? We didn't. We didn't. And yet the limiting factor in nitrogen usage is carbon. It's a feedback loop, and carbon is the limiting factor. So how do I make my fertilizer program better? By putting the necessary elements in place that complement plant charge balance. Okay?
So Darin, I want to ask, I'm going to pull the audience here for a second, because as you sit back and listen to this, I hope it makes sense, right? When I start to hear Darin go down charge balance, there's a difference in production potential. How many guys sell seed or buy a lot of seed, right? You don't have to raise your hand if you're not selling seed. If you're selling seed, I know we've got some seed signs up here, but your scientific research that went at the university level, I believe, that talked about production potential. If Bryce was in here, I would bring out the name David Hula. You know, the decade of dominance, he's grown 623 bushel corn. Production potential on the seed that you're selling is what? When you sell a bag of seed, what? 600, 800, what is it? Come on, Duff. What is it? Unknown. Is it 1,000 bushels? But as soon as you put that in the dirt, we know we're limiting production potential. And again, I think what we are doing as producers, we're limiting that production potential because of the way we've grown in the past. We have to look at things differently, and it is about charge balance.
So the goal then becomes this, in my estimation. The goal becomes, to the point, we know, by the way, the 1,000 bushel corn, that was old genetics. That was in the 80s. That was before we had all the new genetics, okay? Wow. The limiting factor becomes, the minute I put that seed in the ground, what happens? That plant is under constant stress attack from biology and from environment. The 200 bushel corn wasn't meant to be grown in 114 mile an hour winds. Sorry, wasn't meant to. How do I counter that, okay? Or in 100 degree, 100% humidity days, that's really tough on a plant, okay? You can actually have, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, too much sunlight. I produce too much charge in the plant. How does the plant deal with that, okay? There's so many things going that we could talk about in terms of the branches of all of these environmental conditions that take that yield from 1,000 bushel per acre down to 300, 250, 200 because of these environmental stresses. The thing I would like you to think outside the box today is the one environmental stress that you can reduce is plant charge balance. You can have an effect on that by looking at the nutrition that you're adding to the soil, okay?
So limiting factor, again, I would argue the number one thing that influences yield quality and yield potential is plant charge balance. If you're gonna leave here after we walk out this door, if you learn nothing else, please remember that. That's the one thing I would challenge you to go talk to your seed corn guy, to talk to your...
I will tell you, Chad, remove Redox from this conversation. This is true with or without Redox. This is true with or without us, okay? This is a scientific fact that I am presenting to you, which is any nutrient that you buy dealing with plant charge balance, you should start looking at that. Whether or not you ever purchase a product from Redox Bionutrients, plant charge balance will move your nutrient program to the next level. That we know. We actually have, and we can talk about this later, we actually have instruments that we're working with that measure plant charge balance. And one of the things we've proven over the last 18 months is every time my plant is balanced versus unbalanced, I get a yield increase. I get a yield increase every single time, okay? So as you look at the, here's the other thing. When my plant is in balance, guess what happens? I have less disease. I have less insects. I have all of these things. As an example, since the advent of synthetic nitrogen fertilizer, what else has blown up? The use of insecticides and fungicides. I am not anti-insecticide and fungicide. I am saying, what's the thing that we do first? We apply all of this nitrogen without dealing with plant charge balance, and then we just assume that we have to apply all of the pesticides. We just assume that. It's just part of how the crop grows. No. We have crops that are on a plant charge balance program that are on maybe one insecticide and one fungicide, one a year, maybe. And that's only to make themselves feel better. Plant charge balance allows the plant, go to the next slide. Plant charge balance, let me borrow that for just a second. How do I do the laser pointer? There we go. Thank you. Plant charge balance allows a plant to produce what we call secondary metabolic compounds. So if I just deal with nitrogen and I don't deal with plant charge balance, you are trying to produce this outer circle, which is sunlight energy, carbon dioxide, photosynthesis. We make carbohydrates, amino acids, and proteins. And then from proteins, we get roots and leaves and corn and flowers and avocados and all those things, okay? The secondary metabolic pathway deals with plant defense, deals with environmental stress, and all of these compounds, phenols, terpenes, vitamins, plants produce vitamins, fatty acids, they all help the plant deal with the environment. And when we're not focused on helping the plant create plant charge balance, it will turn this pathway off to balance itself and be able to do this primary pathway. I bring that up simply to say, as I deal with plant charge balance, many of the environmental stresses that you all deal with that are so extreme become less and less and less simply by helping the plant create charge balance so it can run these pathways efficiently.
So Darin,
go ahead.
Let me. So, does anybody else see these and kind of like get distracted, right, with these diagrams? It's very simple if you break it down even further. I know this company is the most modest company I've ever been around, right? They will not come up here and preach products, but I'm going to tell you there's a reason why the name that's on his shirt is a chemistry term, is a term within the industry. It's just they were that far in advance 30 years ago. Redox, go look it up, Google it. It's a term.
It is a
and when
yes.
you look at the
you
technology,
all knew this in high school. You're just asleep in chemistry class. That's all.
And for my chemists in the room, right? So Redox, when you look at the technology, Redox active molecules. Again, this is one you should write down. These are complex to be able to look at. The very simple thing to understand is Redox active molecules. When you look at that plant charge balance that he was talking about, 80% negative charge is what's causing damage. Redox active molecules, this technology that he's going to talk about, allows that plant to naturally give or take charge and self-regulate energy. So remember that, right? This is very complex. If I just break it down to its most simple form, Redox technology, RAM, lets you go out and apply a product that has RAM technology that allows the plant to be able to regulate energy, to be able to take on charge or give charge to put a plant within balance. What do you think that does, Kyle? Optimizes yield, right? Now all of a sudden it's not about pounds, it's about utilizing technology that can balance itself within the plant to maximize production potential. That's this slide in the secondary metabolic pathways in a nutshell.
So let's talk about redox active molecules. We're going to get now a little bit more specific to things that we focus on, okay? So I'm just going to take a step back and hope that the discussion about plant charge balance resonated with you. Y'all deal with batteries, then you understand charge balance. Y'all deal with batteries and charge gradients. You do it every day, okay? A plant is no different, okay? We're going to get a little bit more specific, and we're going to talk about redox active molecules. That is a scientific term. That is not related to redox bionutrients. You can look it up on the internet when you go home tonight and you're bored. Redox active molecules. This is my beautiful art diagram of a redox active molecule, and it simply means this molecule can absorb a negative ion, it can give off a negative ion, or it can absorb a positive ion, or it can give off a positive ion. What does that sound like? That sounds like a molecule that can assist a plant in plant charge balance, which is exactly what a redox active molecule will do. If I have all these charge floating around in a plant, does it not make sense to add to my fertilizer program a material that can help balance plant charge? That is the focus of redox bionutrients, is the additives that we put, the additives when we create our nutrient blends. Our nutrient blends contain molecules specifically extracted from natural sources that help the plant deal with plant charge balance. It does it in two ways. Number one, we actually add these molecules to our material that are actually redox active molecules, quinones, etc., okay? Or number two, We have stimulants that stimulate the plant itself to produce more redox active molecules to balance the equation. These molecules are incredibly powerful. You need them in parts per million, some cases parts per billion, but they are so incredibly powerful in their stimulatory effect that the reason they're powerful is they drive a greater equation. That equation is plant charge balance, because once that plant comes in balance and photosynthesis is occurring, it's the most powerful reaction on Earth. All we're doing is allowing that reaction to move forward faster, bigger, stronger, better. Okay?
So back up and let's talk about that again, right? I want to say it again because it's really important. Our limiting factor, is it mineral nutrition? Is it nitrate, nitrogen? What's our limiting factor? Is what we're doing, is what our programs are doing to our fields today, right? I will tell you, if Bryce America was here from Total Acre, well, we get a chance to look at everything across the board when you talk about nutrients, and they've done it the last 7, 8, 9 years, and they have the technology to look at it. What Redox is doing is completely different, and they've been doing it for 30 years in the specialty industry. So thank you for the opportunity to bring this into the Midwest.
Thank you.
This technology, I'm gonna throw you under the bus. Where you at, Kenton? Kenton, you've been a dealer for 10, 12 years? Up in Wisconsin's been utilizing this technology in corn, soybeans, and wheat, certainly turf, specialty, all the. But that same fundamental technology that you're hearing him talk about's been around for 30 years in the specialty markets, and now all of a sudden we as producers in the Midwest have the ability to maximize yield in corn, soybean, wheat production, and row crop. It is a gift, I believe, for us to be able to take advantage and understand, because if we continue to do what we do, which is over-apply certain things like nitrogen, we limit our potential. In markets like Amy just talked about, with the price of nitrogen being high, and you're going to go through some of this, that's limiting, right? We talk about how do we keep our farms around for the next generation. We should be looking at technologies that can take us to the next level. This is what you're here to see today, and RAM is going to do that for us as an industry.
It's an incredibly powerful technology, and it's an incredibly powerful molecule. One of the things that I feel blessed is the discovery that I made 30 years ago as to how to manipulate these molecules and add them to fertilizer. We just were granted 3 weeks ago our 9th patent, Colton, our 9th patent on this technology. This technology extracts from natural sources. The whole reason we do this is to help a plant so that its photosynthetic capability is at as high as it can possibly be. As high as it can possibly be, okay?
So can I double click on that a little bit?
Yeah.
Because again, having been in the industry long enough to understand that not all products are created equal. There's a lot of what I would call blending products. There's a lot of new products that are taking 30-year-old products and saying, here's another 30, and they're just blending out products saying, look at what we have that's new, right? When I started to discover around the business of what Redox is doing and how they're doing it, consistency, right? So great, it worked good last year. This year it didn't work. Last year it didn't work. What's going on? Can I talk a little bit about the production process of what you're looking at? I'm not even going to say the terminology right, but the business is built around a structure that's called ISO 9001. Right?
ISO, yes.
ISO 9001. So all of a sudden, if you start to look at how things are built, it's built differently, and then the process behind consistency, if you see how a business built, there's not a lot that are doing it, right? So if I say what's in a jug, it's in the jug, and now we get that consistent performance over time. It's also a part of your manufacturing process.
So this is really important, and I think I'm going to take a step back and speak our industry, which is bionutrition, needs to check itself, okay? I'm not sure which, I believe it was once again the University of Illinois, or maybe it was the University of Iowa, did a study just 2 years ago, and they took 22 biological products, and those biological products on the label claim to have bug X, Y, or Z at concentration X, Y, or Z. Not one of the products had what it said it did. Not one. And 3 of them had a pathogen in them. Not making this up. This is published information. This is a journal publication, okay? You have, when you're dealing with, it's really, truthfully, it's really easy chemically to make nitrogen. It's really easy chemically to make phosphate. It's really easy chemically to make potassium. It really is. It's a straightforward chemical equation, and we have almost perfected those processes. When you start introducing carbon and sources from living material, what do you get? You get variability. And the last thing you want on your farm is variability in the nutrient solution that you are using. So the reason that we went to ISO 9000 certification is because what that is that is a third-party company. It's an international standard. And they literally get to come in and they get to have access to everything we do. And they analyze everything they do, and their one thing is, are you consistent in what you do? Is the process of manufacturing the same? Is the output the same? Is the material in the jug the same every time you make it? And if you don't, you cannot get the certification. It's not something we buy, it's something that is certified by someone who, last guy was from Zurich, Austria, came in and opened our books and went through everything we do. We simply lay that out because when, again, I will state, when you go from nothing but chemistry, which is actually quite easy to do, to biology and sources of natural extracts, you get variability. So as you look at this new way of thinking and you start to introduce more natural products, humic acids, et cetera, I assure you, one of the things you want to ensure is that they are consistently made. Because to Chad's point, you may get a result one year, you don't want to bet on that result the next year if the product you're buying isn't the same as it was the year before. And that happens a lot in our particular, in our industry, way too much.
Way too much. And the proprietary, I want to talk about this a little bit more. But again, when you hear Darin talk versus where I'm at, right, like I certainly like to bring it to the level that I can get and understand. So Amy actually helped me out with this one time. When you start talking about the way we produce our chemistry is different than others. Think of fractionation, right? You can see this, you can see the process, but think about, does anybody go trick-or-treating with their grandkids or with their kiddos, right? Nobody goes trick-or-treating? All right, there's a couple of you. When you go out and you're running that little wagon behind them and you come back and you're sitting at the wagon, you're separating out that candy. What do you like, Bob? What's your favorite candy out of that box? And your granddaughter comes up and says, hey, I like the Kit Kats, right? I want the M&Ms. This is what Darin's doing. When it comes down to fractionation, we don't want the Almond Joys. Duff, I know you like the Almond Joys. Right? We don't want the Heath. We don't want the Butterfinger. We want the ones, the specific things that we need out of that to be able to build the products. That's what Darin's proprietary technology is. I know I've heard it done with nuts, and I want the cashews and the almonds, but I don't want the walnuts and all the other stuff, right? But if you think about fractionation, to dumb it down to a simple level, it's taking and extracting things that we want specifically. That's where you get that consistency.
Yeah, I'll go to another material that y'all are playing around with or might be familiar with. If I just do a basic extraction of humic acid, only about 40 to 50% of it is actually plant available or plant utilizable. The rest just sits in the soil. We eliminate that before it ever gets to you. We know exactly the molecule size that we want, we know exactly the molecule shape that we want, and we know exactly the molecule polarity that we want. And our extraction process is geared towards that, okay? Same thing with amino acids that we extract. We know exactly the amino acid that we want or the blend of amino acids. We know exactly the size and shape of that amino acid. We know the polarity of that amino acid. Why is polarity important? Charge balance. How many of you, when you're buying some of these materials, actually talk about what's the polarity or what's the charge or how does that work? Does that affect plant charge balance? We don't talk about that. We're so into, wow, I could go down so many rabbit holes. We're so into soil health. Well, we should be into soil health. What's the number one way you can affect soil health? The number one way. What's the product? Y'all have a product in mind, right? I'm gonna blow your mind. The number one way you affect soil health is grow better plants. %98 of all biology in the soil occurs within 2 centimeters of the root. If I take the plant out of the soil, soil biology decreases by 98%. Why is that? Because it's the energy source. I have the plant that's photosynthesizing, it sends out exudates into the soil and bugs grow. You can't afford to buy enough bugs in the jug to make up for poor plant growth. You can't. They've actually done studies where they've put bugs in a jug in the soil, and I'm not knocking it. They're good products if they're properly utilized. Put bugs in a jug in the soil. You can't find them in the soil 2 weeks later. You literally can't find them. That doesn't mean they don't give a stimulatory effect. That means use them for what they are. But the number one way to affect soil health is to grow better plants. The number one way to grow better plants is plant charge balance. If you grow better plants, here's another scientific fact for you. "50% of all photosynthetic activity." So I have this great, wonderful corn leaf, and it's producing all of these carbohydrates and starches. 50% of all the photosynthetic activity produced in a leaf ends up where? In the soil, not in the root. It ends up in the soil. What is the plant trying to do? The plant is trying to create a healthier environment for it to grow in. The number one way to improve soil biology and soil health is to grow a better plant. Because think about it. Think about the tons per acre of photosynthesis that you're putting in the soil when the plant is properly growing. I'm not talking about gallons, I'm talking about tons per acre of bionutrients, molecules that is being photosynthesized that goes out in the soil and feeds those bugs. Wow. That's really powerful stuff, simply by dealing with plant charge balance. Okay?
Can I interrupt you?
Please.
I'm telling you right now, you guys, Darin Moon and John Kelly have educated the industry. Period. People steal this message daily and screw this message up. Okay? I was just talking about fractionation. This company's built on education first. You're going to see some tools. You'll talk about Cypher technology and some of the other things that are out there. Education first, product second. Finding solutions to be able to correct issues that we either as producers or the industry or stress, right, that, you know, from heat, cold stress, that we can correct. But I started off down this path with fractionation for a reason, right? Production process, you look at the use rates on some of these things are very, very small, right? And why is that? How is that? Why is everybody else applying 2-4 quart, gallons per acre versus ounces per acre? You just heard Darin talk about before we went down, which was awesome, love it. You heard about fractionation and how products are built. And I'll have you touch on this a little bit, before we get into some products. Darin doesn't talk products, he educates the marketplace. When you start looking at use rates being so low, it's because consistency of what the process is for production. That's why rates can be so low. You don't need 4 quarts. You don't need 2 quarts. You need ounces per acre.
So this is really important. Here's something else to help you. Forget Redox for just a minute. When we manufacture a material, it has to meet 5 criteria. You should apply this to every nutrient you bring on the farm. Number 1, it has to deal with movement in the soil. I apply something and it sits right there. Well, the root may hit it, the water may hit it, it may not. But if I add something to that nutrient to help it move in the soil, it's much more efficient. So the molecules that we extract have to be put into a solution that helps them move in the soil. That's the number one thing about a fertilizer, is it has to move. If it doesn't move, it is less efficient. Number 2, just because I move it, it meets the root surface. That root surface carries a charge, and I have to be able to move it through that root surface. That's a trick in and of itself. The fertilizer that you purchase should be able to be highly absorbable by the plant. Just because it has an NPK label doesn't mean it can readily be absorbed by the plant. Number 3, once I get inside of the plant, guess what? I have a whole different chemical equation. I have the chemistry of the soil, and I put that nutrient on the soil, and it has to deal with that. Once I get inside the plant, guess what? Think about it. I have an entirely different chemistry. I have to be able to move it in that chemistry to where it needs to go. That's translocation. Then once I get it to where it needs to go, it has to still be in a form that can be metabolized. It has to be created into something. And then once it's created, it has to then move to where it's supposed to go. It's a rather complex process. The way you increase nutrient efficiency, plant growth, and yield is you make sure that the nutrient program you are utilizing meets these 5 criteria, with or without redox. Can my nutrient move in the soil? Will it move in the plant, or does it burn the plant, or does it just get stuck in the plant? Can it still be utilized to create starch and sugar and all the things I need? That's a really, really important thing if we're going to be more efficient and get more units per acre. Putting on more NPK is not going to get us there. But dealing with this as part of the equation and making, what if I could take my nitrogen from 30% efficiency to 50% efficiency? Wow, same nitrogen, much more efficient. Not just efficient in terms of how much I use, but efficient in terms of how the plant grows. That's really, really, really critical.
So what does that mean, right? Think about that. What did we talk about out of the gate? 50-50 balance. What did he say? What was the percent that university research for the last 5 to 7 years that came out with, you apply, how many pounds per acre are you applying? I'm going to pick on you again, Cody. I don't want to bring anybody else. I see he's on his phone, so I was like, he's taking notes. I know it. How many pounds per acre are you using per bushel? Dryland corn, APH 200. What are you using? What's Iowa State tell you? A pound? 1.2, 1.3. Let's just say you're using on 200 bushel dryland corn, 1 pound per acre, right? We kind of went through this and you talked about it. I know you're going to double click on it too. But 33%, right? A third of that nitrogen that Cody is applying on that dryland corn is available to that plant, is actually found in the plant, used by the plant. What's happening to the rest of it? Darin mentioned it earlier. Denitrification, oxidation, it's gone, right? So what dollar, what's the cost for that piece, that unit of nitrogen that we just blew? What'd you pay? Did you pre-book anything? 70.
It's over $700 today.
$700.
Yeah, it's over $700
so
today.
Price per pound, right? There's a lot of risk of that 70% of nitrate.
And Chad, I would submit that when nitrogen was 250, which y'all are used to, okay, this wasn't a big deal, okay? It's actually less expensive to put on more nitrogen. As long as there is going to be strife in the Middle East, as long as Russia is going to be Russia, because guess what we did? We exported all of our nitrogen to Russia, Ukraine. That part of the world makes your nitrogen. Guess what happens when there's a problem? There's risk and the cost goes up. It's not going to come down anytime soon. If you're waiting for the price of nitrogen to go back to $300, go on vacation.
One missile away, right?
You're one missile away from it being $1,000, okay? All I'm suggesting is I got 130 more units I can deal with here.
And
I
that's
got 130 more units that I can play with and try to get more out of without adding more nitrogen. Wow. That's not me talking. That's a university talking.
So 20, all we're talking about, is it really that much to think a product that can take energy, right, and move 20% more, metabolize 20% more of that nitrogen that is getting wasted anyways, right? And this is what, if you've got the clicker, what we're going to talk about a little bit. I know Darin doesn't like to talk about products, but when you talk about education, you have to bring in a product. And this is a revolutionary product. You've been working on it for 10 years.
15.
It's got 15
we're
years.
now at 15.
But we've seen some amazing success to be able to take the nitrogen that's applied to help metabolize that nitrogen up to 50% of applied nitrogen.
So this material is very high in redox active molecules. That's its main extract. It's 3 botanical extracts from 3 separate plants, okay, mixed in a very blend-friendly formula, okay. We have years of research blending it with liquid fertilizer. We have now been very successful of coating dry fertilizer. The one fertilizer that we cannot deal with right now is ammonia, okay. This is a plant active molecule. This is not creating more biology in the soil. This is not fixing atmospheric nitrogen like a lot of companies are pursuing. This is a plant active molecule. The plant is capable of metabolizing nitrogen at a 50% increased rate. How is that possible? The word I want you to remember is redox active molecule, because it deals with plant charge balance. As the plant balances itself from the photosynthetic reaction, it's able to metabolize faster. As it's able to metabolize faster, it can metabolize more nitrogen into proteins and amino acids. As that happens, the process speeds up. I have one of two choices. I can increase yield, or I can keep yield the same and use less nitrogen. One of the two. One of the two. As you increase plant charge balance, those yield potentials of 300, 350, 400 start to become much more possible. This is not putting on more fertilizer. This is taking the fertilizer that you are already purchasing and utilizing it better. That's what this is doing. Okay, more fertilizer. I assure you, if you take a couple of things away, more fertilizer is not the answer. You've all tried it. You've all tried it, and you do not get more. And are we in Nebraska?
We're in Iowa.
We're in Iowa. I know we're close. I'm sorry. I'm learning my geography. I was asleep in geography class in high school. Nebraska, the state of Nebraska, is starting to look very serious at nitrogen application. In California, Washington, it's very serious. You actually have to have a nitrogen use plan, and if your groundwater carries too much nitrogen, they will shut you down. Okay? Don't go there because it is not necessary. The reason we've had to over-apply nitrogen is because of its inefficiency. If we create efficiency of use, you can maintain the yields you have with less nitrogen. That's the point of the research we're going to present today, is we're at 50% nitrogen use efficiency, getting equivalent or better yields. How is that possible? This isn't magic. I didn't go to some exterior, I didn't fly to Jupiter and create some bug. No, this is basic biochemistry 101. We're just applying it to fertilizer now.
I want to interrupt you because Darin Moon he doesn't need to be here today. He's created his business in the specialty market for the past 35 years, 32 years, up and down, flown over the Midwest, right? Why be here today to talk about this? What's the first thing I told you when I met this gentleman? What's the first thing he said to me? Tell the truth. Everything else falls into place. Why would he risk the business that he created 32 years ago to bring a product to the Midwest and say, I've got a bug in a jug and I'm a brand new startup? Darin owns the company. Darin owns the company, right? Think about that for a second. Why would he risk or come up here and tell you you can optimize your nitrogen use up to 50%? Now all of a sudden, Kyle, if you want to grow 1 unit of N for one bushel of corn, instead of applying 200, you can apply 100 pounds of nitrogen and you're just fine. Up to 50% nitrogen optimization.
Well, so what does that do? A couple of things that I think of. I think of what that does to your business plan. If I have to commit up front to less nitrogen, what are they making you do right now? Pre-purchase? If you want to get a good deal, you got to pre-purchase. What if you had to pre-purchase a lot less and risk that money a lot less? What if the price of nitrogen goes down next spring and you're stuck with high-priced nitrogen? I don't know, but the whole idea of efficiency in the nutrient business today is nutrient volatility is here to stay. If you look at a 20-year price chart of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, it was relatively stable until 2014. And since 2014, the price chart does this. The volatility in the nutrient market is here to stay. You don't want to bet on that. You don't want to 6 months in advance have to put your hard-earned money on the hopes of somebody in a boat making it from Russia to the United States. No, you don't want to do that. So from a business standpoint, it makes more sense too. You're less reliant on external market forces because you're more efficient with what you are doing.
So I'm going to go back to confidence, products that work. This is, again, a little complex. I'm going to lean on you for this, but third party, the last 15 years, I've been saying 10, so thank you. They've been building this product, released 12 months ago, really. It was last year.
Commercially.
It was released commercially. But when you look at the confidence they have, it's because of the amount of technology and time that they've put into it. What's been really fun is to see the stories, Kenton, where you at, Cody, that have been utilizing products like this in the field for the last couple years. it works. When we have people that look at our product technically, scientifically, maybe talk through this slide. If we know a product works, how do we know and show that it does?
Yeah, just a little backstory really quickly. Why did it take us 15 years to bring this commercially to the marketplace? Because it was never lost on me, having grown up on a farm, that when I walk in a room in Iowa and ask you to reduce your nitrogen 50%, I don't want you to beat me up. It's not lost on me the fact of what I'm talking about. It's really, really cutting edge. It's really way out there. Think about it, okay? People come around your farm all the time and talk about 20%. Truth is, you're wasting, we proved it, you're wasting that much, okay? To get to 50% and grow the same crop or a better crop, we had to make sure that we researched it on multiple soil types, multiple crops, multiple geographical regions, under multiple application scenarios. That took a long time. There's a huge investment up front in this, getting rid of a lot of the variables, to where now we are 100% confident in the outcome of this material when blended with a fertilizer. We're 100% confident in the outcome of this material, okay? Number one. Number two, we took it to what does it actually do? Well, we can talk about yield all you want, okay? How does it get there? This is a gene sequencing study. Can I have that? This is a gene sequencing study. This is the first study done 12 months ago. We're harvesting now and diving deeper into this. There are 361 genes that are associated with, in this particular case, with nitrogen assimilation. This is on corn. This was actually studied on corn. 361 genes that when I just put nitrogen on, I get a sequence of 361 individual genes. When I add RDX-N, I get 336 completely different genes. 45 of them are in common between nitrogen and redox, okay? The point is, we are now beginning to understand, and we will be able to narrow this down further, how to make this product even more effective and efficient. But we now know we are unique in being able to stimulate these genes that otherwise are not stimulated by nitrogen that improve the efficiency of nitrogen. These genes here are associated with nitrogen metabolism and efficiency. We are stimulating those genes, and we are now continuing that process, number one. Number two, there we go. Number two, what does this mean in terms of practicality? Sometimes you put a material on and it works for 3 or 4 weeks, and then you got to reapply it. One application at planting, we studied it V4, V6, V8, and V10. This is 50% nitrogen. These are the gene responses at 50% nitrogen. This is 100% nitrogen. This is 50% nitrogen with RDX-N. We increase for a period of time, V4 through V10, this genetic sequencing that deals with nitrogen assimilation and metabolism. It doesn't just happen and it's gone. This was put on at planting, and at V10 it is still effective. Still effective. And there's a whole nother class I could give on why and how it's effective. We won't even go there, because you'll really be asleep then. But the point being, the reason that we are so excited, Chad talked about investment. I just mortgaged my future at 62 years of age for multiples of millions of dollars to build a manufacturing plant for this material. We're betting everything on it. I've never seen a material like this, and we have some really, really successful products already in the marketplace. None of them compare to this technology. We know the molecules, we know the application rate, we know the timing, and we know the response. We are so excited about this technology for several reasons. And let me just talk about that real quick for just a minute. Number one, because it helps your bottom line. It's not lost on me the struggles. Last summer, I purchased a rather large pecan farm in Georgia. Number one, I like coming out here to this part of the country. I know it's a little further south, but it's just so green and beautiful out here that I just love it. Number two, I've always loved pecans, and this opportunity came up. It's not lost on me now that that farm doesn't get to rob from me. It has to be a profit center. Has to be a profit center. So nutrient efficiency takes on a whole new meaning to me personally. It's a big dollar, okay? Number one. Number two, it's the right way to do things. You are handing your farms off to the next generation. We've got to be better at what we do, not just from a business standpoint, from an environmental standpoint, from a water quality standpoint, from a quality of food standpoint. I am on the train of the best medicine you can take is quality food. That's the best medicine you can take, is quality food. That is dependent on how we grow it. So if there's a better way of growing it to reduce nitrate toxicity, okay? If there's a better way of growing it to get more sugars and starches in the plant at a more concentrated rate, we should be doing it. We should be doing it. That's why we're here. It's not just the business side of this. I firmly believe in what we're doing from an environmental standpoint, from a plant health standpoint, from a human health standpoint. I am 100% in belief that this is a better way of doing things. 100%.
Darin, I know we're going to go deeper into this study down the road when Amy's up here, but
Yeah.
you know, just the way we know and how we know, this is a really good piece of the puzzle. I want to. Is it okay if I kind of open it up to Q&A and
Yeah,
and
great.
this last
Yes,
5-10 minutes before
I've
we
talked plenty.
Abe, I'm
Yes.
looking at you. Those donuts, you haven't got one of those yet, so I'm between you and donuts. So, but this last 10, you good for another
Yep,
10
yep.
minutes? I'd love to be able to kind of pull the audience on questions you may have after hearing this, because again, some of this is new. Tyler, will you come up here and pass the mic around? So as you're thinking of questions and things that you might, and we've got another mic back there, but I'd really challenge you to, now's the time to ask the question. This is the spot, right? Put you on the stage. No pressure, Darin.
And if you'll allow me just one more thing. I don't want this to be complicated. I know I stand up here and I go in a whole bunch of different ways, but in reality, charge balance is something that you do with every day when you get in a car. It's something you do every day when you start a tractor. It's something that happens every day in your life. Charge balance is not complicated. It is not complicated. It just hasn't been talked about. So I don't want this to scare you because we're talking about chemistry and charge and all. It is not complicated. I promise you, it is not complicated.
And if you would, give me your first name and where you're out of.
Yeah, Abe Sandquist of Woodbine, Iowa, natural fertilizer. Yeah, very good. I really enjoyed what you just got done saying here for the past hour. I'm in the natural fertilizer business. I really think that there's a lot of opportunities with all that's going on. I want you to talk a bit more. Right now we have a lot of people talking about, the whole industry talks about carbon and why we should, you know, for one, they're talking about ozone layer issues, but then also we're talking about building soil. Explain a little bit more about why carbon is, what carbon does, and why is it important?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. So we have two dichotomies here, okay? We have two dichotomies here. We have all of these industrial production that gives off carbon dioxide, okay? And so what is the world separate from agriculture trying to do? Find ways to get rid of it. If you go to greenhouse production, what do they do in greenhouse production? They literally seal the greenhouse and pump in carbon dioxide to a greater extent. Why? Because plants grow better, okay? Carbon dioxide is essential for plant growth. The equation is this. I have sunlight energy, my beautiful plant here, and I have water. That creates charge. Then I add carbon in the form of carbon dioxide or simple sugars, okay, small molecules. And when I combine carbon dioxide with when I combine carbon dioxide with energy, I get sugar, C6H12O6. That's simple sugar. When I combine simple sugar with nitrogen, I get amino acids. When I combine amino acids into polyamino acids, I get proteins, and then the process takes up from there. That all stops when I run out of carbon dioxide. The system stops. Two things stop the system: plant charge balance and not enough soluble carbon in the system. And here's the problem with the system. Mother Nature never intended for there to be monocropped 300 bushel corn. I'm not knocking it. I'm saying that naturally this cannot be provided. So providing natural sources of soluble carbon is essential if I want to be more efficient in this equation. And then balancing that with plant charge balance. Carbon dioxide is the limiting factor. When I apply 200 units of nitrogen, the limiting factor in that nitrogen metabolism is how fast the plant can assimilate charge balance and carbon. Did that answer the question? Yeah, that's it. It's a very simple equation. It's a feedback loop. When I run out of carbon dioxide, as I said earlier, the plant stores it as NO3 nitrogen, and that's when bugs and insects come along. There was a really interesting study done years ago by the University of Florida, and they studied different sources of nitrogen. And when they used synthetic nitrogen versus organic nitrogen, the entire system was different. The type of enzymes that were produced by the plant, the type of enzyme cascades that happened in the plant was totally different when I used synthetic nitrogen versus organic nitrogen. What's the biggest difference between synthetic nitrogen and organic nitrogen? Soluble carbon. Soluble carbon. Okay?
Looks like we got another one back here. Thanks, Abe.
Hey, Chad. All right, can you hear me now? Hi, Chad. Brody Benton. I live just south of Ames. We farm in Guthrie County, which is about an hour east of here. But my question is, from a testing standpoint or tracking standpoint for that plant charge balance, are you looking at sap analysis throughout the growing season, or what does the tool look like that you have?
Great question. Okay. There are two things that you can actually measure in millivolts, plant charge balance. Okay. It is an ORP meter. You can buy this on the internet, and pH. We are actually working right now. We've been doing this for 12 months. There's actually a company out of France that's combining these two together. It doesn't work right now. I'll just tell you this. We've been working with it for the last 6 months, and right now the results are inconsistent. But if you take an ORP meter and a pH meter, and I'd be happy to show you how to do this, and you take the sap of a plant, you can actually measure in millivolts, and then it has to be adjusted for pH, and you will get a number from minus 2,000 to plus 2,000. What we know is this: plants grow best at between minus 200 and minus 400 millivolts. We know that. That is research that was started by a guy by the name of Olivier Husson in France about 15 years ago, and we have picked it up and run with it from a commercial basis. And I can tell you, over hundreds of different research tests where we are growing crops in this range, there is always an increase in production. Always. So there is a way to measure this. It's very tedious. That's the problem with it right now, is it's very tedious, but it gives you an indication. So here's what I would say. Here's how this works. I hope I'm okay?
No, it's good. And I'm gonna go back to the crop diagnostic. Well, I don't know if I can say that. There's a company that we're working with, but talking about how do we know that it works when it works?
Yes.
Talk about the
yes.
genetic.
Okay. So here's what happens. If I'm too negative, that means my plant is oxidized. That means I need to put on fertilizer that will reduce that charge. If I'm not negative enough, that means I need to add something that has charge. That's where we start. Sometimes by adding fertilizer to a plant that's already too charged, I'm not helping the system. It's as simple as putting something with that fertilizer that helps deal with the charge. Okay? That's really complicated. John? Yeah, so it comes from sap, and you do it early in the morning.
The sap oxidizes too much. It has to be done in field.
You have to do it right then and there.
The measurements really are only appropriate today for research because it's so tedious, but we're trying to, as Darin mentioned, we're trying to correct that.
If you want to go there again, I'll help any of you do this. The instruments are commercially available. It's just an incredibly tedious process. Incredibly tedious process. We're doing it for research prospect because we are going to prove to you. I guarantee you in 5 years, every company that comes and talks to you will talk about plant charge balance, and they will talk about, the measurement is called EH. You can look that up. Measurement's called EH. That's what you get when you combine ORP, oxygen reduction potential, with pH. You get EH. Every company that comes and talks to you in 5 years will be talking about this. I guarantee it. Because it is a proven measurement of plant charge balance and how to then fertilize. How do I fertilize? I fertilize based on, is my plant overcharged or undercharged? That's step number one. Then step number two is using sap analysis for nutrients. What nutrients do I need? We can really start to dial this in. Okay? Number three is diagnostics, and what are the proteins and amino acids? What's the gene sequencing that I want to influence? And I start creating materials for that. There's a way to really dial this in. It starts with plant charge balance and measuring it. And again, I want to be at between 200 and minus 200 and minus 400 millivolts. We know that.
Y'all,
I'm sorry, I can't. Yeah, yeah. So there's, wow, Chad, this is really deep stuff, guys.
so hold on a second,
Ooh.
right? Because here's what Amy and I talk about all the time, Darin. There's the shallow end of the pool, which I live in.
We're not in
There's
the deep
6
end.
foot
We're
deep,
in
and
600
we might be
fathoms
20
here.
foot, yeah.
Let's you and I talk afterwards, because now we're really, really deep. This is
Brody,
like,
thank you for the question, but so no, let's go back to our limiting factors, right? We said 1,000, right? Duff out in Boston, out east, he's growing 1,000 bushel corn. He's ready to go. But our limiting factor now becomes, does it starting to make sense, right? Plant charge balance and all these little factors that you're throwing up on the board right now. As soon as we plant that seed, we are losing production. So again, I would go back to how do we optimize production potential is mitigate that risk with charge balance. Go ahead, sir.
I've got a question. I grow a rye cover crop, and I let the rye cover crop get really tall, 5 feet tall, and it's headed out. It has a high carbon to nitrogen ratio, and then I plant soybeans into that rye cover crop, and I'm putting it goes through humidification. I'm putting a lot of carbon into the soil, but what I'm doing is, because when that rye cover crop breaks down, it's using up all the nitrogen in the soil to break that rye cover crop down, and it takes the entire summer. Basically, if I have 5,000 pounds of cover crop per acre, it's taken the entire summer to break that cover crop down, and I'm robbing nitrogen from my soybean plant. How can I get, using your program, how can I get nitrogen, enough nitrogen into the soil and get it into my soybean crop? Because it takes, to grow 60 bushel beans, it takes about 480 units of nitrogen per acre. How, when that, how can I get nitrogen into my soybean crop?
just speaking directly to this, and John, if you want to jump in, but speaking directly to this, there is an N requirement. Okay, I do not want to give the impression that this is a magical product that magically creates nitrogen. So there is an N requirement. If you are sucking out of the soil to those microbes to break down that nitrogen in that rye cover crop, I can't fix that. All I can do is plant charge balance to take whatever nitrogen is available and make it more efficient. But what you're talking about in terms of you're literally removing from the system that nitrogen, that's a different scenario. I love what you're doing. I grew up on green manure crops and doing all that. I firmly believe in that, but there is a nitrogen amount requirement that none of this replaces. Okay, what we're talking about is nitrogen.
But let's just talk about that, because you're inducing is what's called denitrification. Microbes need nitrogen just like the plant does, and even with rhizobium working really hard, they're going to get that nitrogen first. So essentially, what you do, and typically we do not recommend nitrogen inputs on a legume crop. But you've got denitrification. So the limiting factor, as Darin said, is nitrogen.
Your limiting factor is nitrogen. All we could do is take soluble nitrogen and make it more efficient in the plant. That's all. That's all. No, we don't deal with that. We just simply deal with what's there. We make it more assimilable to the plant. So if there's 1 unit in the soil, it's like 2. If there's 5 units in the soil, it's like 10. If there's 10 units in the soil, it's like 20. That's all we're doing. That's all we're doing.
We got a question over there.
Compost has always been used in small gardens and things, and like you said, historically manure. Compost is humus, and humus is humic acid somewhat. What is the relationship between compost you get at your garden store and your product?
So, really interesting question. My job out of college was managing the world's largest grape farm, 14,000 acres of table grapes. I made 20,000 tons of compost a year for that farm, okay? And I learned a whole bunch about compost. And I'll break it down to my interpretation of compost is, number one, it takes time to make compost, okay? Number two, the greatest thing you can do to compost is it will naturally, if it's properly aerified and watered, it will naturally break down into the molecules that you're talking about, humus, nitrogen, etc. You got to get rid of the salt. And that's why you make compost, is to reduce the salt load. So we actually had measurements, okay? Afterwards, I'd be happy to share them. We actually had measurements about the amount of salt load, about the amount of ammonia that we wanted to see before that compost was applied to a field. Because why? What's the biggest problem with applying natural sources? It's the salt load. It is the salt load. We're doing research right now with liquid manure, okay? Plants don't like liquid manure. Not because it's bad, but because after years and years of use, unless you have a system that's breaking that manure down, you are building up one thing, and that's the salt load. Not knocking it. I'm a pro compost manure guy. You've got to deal with the downside. There's nothing free, okay? And the one problem with manure is the salt load. How are you going to deal with that? If you have proper water movement in your soil, if you have proper tillage, and you're growing great plants, you will deal with it just fine, okay? You will deal with it just fine. The byproducts of that are very, very positive. Humus, you get some nitrogen out of it, you get minerals out of it. Those minerals still have to be further decomposed, because what's one of the issues? I can tell you in our area, which we're a very dairy-rich area in Idaho, southern Idaho, we are building phosphorus load in the soil, not phosphorus efficiency. I hope that makes sense. You've got to figure a way how to produce the soil metabolism that further degrades that and releases that phosphorus, okay?
So Darin, if you're okay, listen, I know there's a lot of questions here, and I want you to ask your question, and then I'm going to do a little bit of a schedule change. I'm going to ask Amy to come up and do some whiteboard stuff here for 15 more minutes. But I want John Kelly. Can I do a quick little introduction of you and then get you up here too? You always get off the side. Mr. John Kelly is the commercial agronomist out of Burley, Idaho, and an integral. John Kelly, get up here. I know, get up here. You're no more sidelines. I'm going to put it. Plus, he's got a beautiful haircut too. So as Darin's up here too, and you guys can go back and forth. One of the owners in the business and has been around this since inception. So John Kelly, thanks for answering some questions. Thanks for letting me put you on the spot.
We letting Ken go?
Thank you. John, Darin, it doesn't matter. I just kind of want you to touch on this if you can. I think you did this last fall. We hear about plant stress a lot, when we're out, especially in the marketplace today. Darin, you did this this last winter in Burley, and you talked about oxidation and, the free oxygen as it relates to some of these over applications of, nitrate especially, and how that can have an impact. And I think that deals with our plant charge balance conversation as well. So can you just really quickly touch on that from a plant stress standpoint? Because I hear about it all the time. There, again, the marketplace is buzzing with plant stress, and it's this buzzword. But how can we affect that within the conversation that we had this morning, and why is that important?
Thank you. This is really important, okay? Oxidation happens when? Oxidation happens when there's too much energy in the system. It's the only reason, for example, in our conversation about compost or manure, why I'm so high on this is because salt leads to oxidation, okay? Salt leads to oxidation. That doesn't mean you shouldn't use manure. That means you have to realize what's happening when you use it, okay? Farming leads to salt accumulation. What is a fertilizer? It's a salt. And we're applying all of this fertilizer and salt. We're having an oxidative buildup in our soils, okay? How do you destroy organic matter? Two ways. Increase the charge or expose it to ultraviolet radiation. When you walk out in the sunlight this afternoon and it hits your skin, what is going to happen? It creates age. Okay? Something I'm trying really, really hard to avoid, and I'm not doing a very good job of it. Okay? So in this system of oxidation, the reason we deal so much with oxidation is damaging to organic molecules, okay? And that happens with charge. And I didn't make the system, God made the system, so you can talk to him about it, okay? When I break down the water molecule and I get 4 electrons and 4 protons, that is a highly energetic molecule, and that is floating around in the system. And it goes down this chain in the photosystem 1 and photosystem 2. As it goes down this chain, this electron gives off energy to create NADPH, and that's the energy molecule that creates ATP that drives everything. But at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when it's 100 degrees and 100% humidity, I have too many electrons, and I create oxidation. So the plant then has to produce phenolic compounds or redox active molecules that can absorb that oxidation, or that can absorb sodium, that can absorb excess charge. That's why this becomes important, is because oxidation is destructive to the system.
Darin, could you just walk through the process of nitrate reduction in
Yeah.
the oxidants produced by that process?
Yeah. Very quickly. So you all are, I'm not sure how aware you are of the actual nitrogen process, that when you apply nitrogen, but this is how it works. We did a study at the University of Florida. Wow, this was early on, 20 plus years ago. We took sand and we added nitrogen to the sand at upwards of 300 units per acre as urea. This was added as urea, okay? Within 24 hours, 90% of that nitrogen, urea, was nitrate nitrogen within 24 hours. And you all are used to this in the Midwest. Why do you apply ammonia in the fall? Because there's no biological activity converted to nitrogen. Once the soil gets above 55 degrees, what happens? That ammonia is immediately converted into nitrate nitrogen, okay? 80% of all the nitrogen in a plant is in the form of nitrate nitrogen. I don't care if you're applying ammonia, urea, I don't care what you're applying. 80% of the nitrogen in a plant is as nitrate nitrogen. The problem is the plant can't use nitrate nitrogen. I didn't make the system, don't get mad at me, okay? Here's the system. I have NO3 as a negative charge. That is converted to NO2. That is converted to NO. Then I add hydrogen from the water molecule, and I get to ammonia. NH2 is the ammonia form that a plant utilizes. When I get to NH2, I can add carbon, I can add sugar, and I get all of the wonderful molecules that make a plant grow. That's how the process works. Here's the problem. What happens to this oxygen right here? Remember, oxygen is only stable as O2. What's this? It's called a free radical oxygen. It only exists for milliseconds, but as that breaks down, if I don't have an efficient system, that is a very damaging molecule to plants. So when I have a plant that has excess nitrate nitrogen, guess what I have in excess of? All of these free-floating oxygen radicals. And they can, if I don't have enough redox active molecules to absorb them, they can be very damaging to the plant. On top of, remember, I have all these floating electrons from photosynthesis as well. What am I talking about? Charge balance. That's all I'm talking about is charge balance. But this system of handling nitrogen in a plant, and I am particularly concerned in agriculture about nitrogen excess, because the system literally shuts down when I have excess nitrogen. It literally shuts down. We've got to start to prevent this. So talking about the fact that we can be more efficient with nitrogen, we're so inefficient that it's really not that big a deal. We just got to make sure we're doing it right, okay? Did I answer that correctly? Okay.
Ken, thank you for the question. That was good, right? Listen, I think there's one thing that we can really do very quickly is we can go from shallow to 6 foot to deep end. Amy, will you come up here for me? I'd really like to kind of, and Darin, you're still going to be on, keep that mic to the side because you're going to have to come up here, but go get a drink of water. I'm going to put Amy on the stage here. It's a little bit of a schedule change. but I want to be able to kind of showcase again plant charge balance, and then look at it in terms of, cost. What's happening with that? What's that look like? Aim, if you want to pop on the whiteboard, you and John kind of take this, and then we'll take a break. Duff, I'll get you another dome. Don't worry about it. Be all good to go.
Well, I want to do is look at some math, actually put some dollars and cents behind. Now we've talked about the agronomics, right? Redox active molecules and plant charge balance, but what does that mean when I'm making decisions about fall applications and spring fertilizer, right? So we look at average APH here in this county. What are we doing for bushels? Where's Kyle? Give me a number. What are we shooting for? APH average, 200?
Who are you gonna pick on here? Pick somebody that. So Brody, Central Iowa, dryland corn APH. What's product? 200, 210, 180. He says 210, 215. We're close enough to Nebraska. We're somewhere around 200, right? We don't have the good stuff you've got.
So
let's
200?
just use 200.
Okay,
That's a good
okay,
number.
okay, all right.
I know we're not going to go into the Nebraska versus Iowa State. Where you at, right? Like,
All
but if you
right.
look at 200 bushel corn, let's just take that as an
Okay.
average dryland corn yield.
And then units of nitrogen, right, that we're going to be applying in this area, we'd say an efficient acre would be at that.
Well, we heard Cody talk about
Let's see.
Iowa State, Northwest Missouri State, anywhere from that 1.1 to let's call it 0.7 being fully optimized.
All right,
If
0.7.
we-
And actually, it's 0.7 units of nitrogen per bushel is what actually is in corn.
Okay.
0.7 units of nitrogen per bushel is actually was contained in the kernel.
All right. So that's 140 pounds of N, right, if we were going to be efficient. If we're applying more than that, right, we're at that 1.
And just to clarify, the nitrogen research, the range is they've found that 21% of NH3 ends up in the crop the next year, with a hive about 41% in a UN 32 side dress, but the average is about 33% in Midwest on corn,
All right.
which is interesting because University of California, with a much higher percentage of fertigation utilized in that state, they estimate 34%. So just whenever you
34?
want to look at it, just call it 33%.
Okay.
That's fine.
So does somebody have a calculator? Can we multiply that 33% to that 140 pounds and get total pounds that are actually getting to the plant? 46.2. Okay. All right. And let's just say hypothetically 100 pounds of that application are at side dress, just to make the math easy, right? So if we take that 100 pounds side dress, and we know we only have 46 pounds actually getting to the plant, and when I was looking at the prices, I took a screenshot of what the prices were as of this morning. What's that? So 28% is 0.77 pounds. So if I'm 0.77 pounds.
Cents per unit.
Cents. So that's 70. 100 pounds in my side dress, right? Okay, all right. So I just spent $77, and now my efficiency's at a third. And let's bring it around. We're going to land the plane on RDX-N, and the claim that we're making, and we want you guys to think about when we're thinking about plant charge balance and redox active molecules, is the power and the technology in RDX-N that we can take this liquid application, the jugs right there, they come in 2.5 gallon jugs. For every 16 ounces, you can pull back or optimize 25 pounds of nitrogen. That's about 40, if it's apples to apples, which it's not, but that's about 48 cents a pound, right? Right now, my side dress is at 77 cents. If I cut that side dress in half, right? Now I'm going low. Can I move this? If I take 50 pounds, can I move this up and down? Or I can just use an eraser. So if I take 50 pounds at my side dress and I use RDX-N which is going to be 32 ounces at this rate, right? That's 24 bucks. It's 12 bucks for 16 ounces, okay? If I had gone at my full rate, that same 50 pounds times 77 cents is what? 38 bucks. So what's 38.50 minus 24 bucks? About 15 bucks? 14.50. Okay. So if I take that 100 pounds in my side dress and I replace 50%, and I want to double click on this, it's percent, not pounds. Every other nutrient use efficiency product out there is claiming pounds per acre. And because of the power of the Redox active technology we have, we can do percent. There's no cap on this, right? So let me ask you this. We talked about 0.7 nutrient efficiency. Is there a number that's too low? Or how low have we gone when we talk about using Redox during our side dress or in-season liquid application with corn?
We've gone very low, but those are systems where the grower is already extremely efficient in his usage. So some growers are already at 0.5, 0.7 NUE or nitrogen use efficiency. And the question is, we're already lean. Can we pull it back? No, that's the perfect situation to introduce additional efficiency where you've got a system where your soil, your application, your timing is working well, it's performing well. Absolutely you can. And I'll point out, if we take that number of 33% efficiency, all we're asking is to get to 48% efficiency. That's all we're asking with the technology. So 50% sounds incredible, and it is, but we're only asking for about 15% more efficiency in the nitrogen utilization.
And I know in the next discussion, we're going to do a break after this, but the next discussion between Zach and Bryce, who's part of Total Acre, we actually have tissue samples and pictures and such to actually show the efficacy that we're seeing in the field right now. So you have to see that visually.
So this is the best part about the program is we look at what we put on the piece of paper that says, hey, this is what we're going to present to you. We don't want to come up here and chat and talk and be like, gosh, Mac, where are we, right? Let's get another coffee. Let's get a donut. Scebold's terrible at this. We want to make sure we can make those adjustments. So first off, thanks for listening. Darin, thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you, Amy. We're going to get a little break in here. If you see these gray shirts, please come up, ask questions, get a donut, talk, get cooled down, sit in front of the AC. We're going to come back with a little bit more of this type of conversation. I'm going to ask Bryce, I just want to do this. This is fun, right? We'll do this kind of conversation. And then, Zach, I might ask you to come up too afterwards. So go ahead and we're going to take a 15-minute break. Go ahead and socialize, grab a cup of coffee, donut. Thanks.